Caring for a parent with dementia can be one of the most challenging experiences a person will face. The emotional toll, the physical exhaustion, and the feeling that your own life is slipping away are all real and overwhelming. But what if that person you're caring for was a seriously tough person to deal with your entire life? How do you navigate a new reality with someone who was already a difficult person? And how does dementia change that dynamic? Whether your loved one's personality has changed or not, the unique challenges of caregiving can test even the strongest relationships. On this episode of Fading Memories, we'll hear one caregiver's raw and honest story. His journey offers a powerful message of resilience and reconciliation and finding yourself while caring for someone else. Welcome to Fading Memories, your source for all things dementia caregiving. I'm your host, Jen Fink, and I have had 3 generations of loved ones with dementia, and I'm here to share the knowledge I've gained with you. Welcome back, Fading Memories listeners. Thank you for tuning in every day, every week. With me today is Josh Hickman. He is the author of Forgetting, and we are going to talk about his caregiving journey with his mom that started out kind of rough, but kind of ended okay. So thanks for joining me, Josh.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So why don't you give us your background? Everybody knows mine already.
Yeah. Let's see. I grew up more or less in Dallas. I'm an artist and a writer. And in my 30s, I left Dallas. I moved to Los Angeles, where I lived and worked in Hollywood for about 14 years. And then due to life circumstances and things, my father passed away. He had cancer and passed away. I had a 13-year relationship breakup. I lost my job.
Oh, dear.
Well, kind of all in quick succession.
Sounds like a great year.
Yeah. And then I started a new relationship with a lady who was here in Dallas, who I'd known from high school. And all these things can sort of conspired to bring me back home. I knew my mother was living by herself for the first time in, 55 years or more than that, I guess. No, about 55. And I knew by the way she lived that she probably wasn't doing great because my father had done everything for her. And so I came back, and in 2019, had a pretty serious illness as soon as I came back as well. And then was living in Dallas here with my girlfriend at the time, and seeing my mother getting back, we had always been in touch. My mother, I mean, if you didn't keep in touch with my mother, you were in big trouble, So I had always kept in touch with her, on the phone and so forth. I kept in touch with her even more when my father was diagnosed with cancer, because I would call him every day, which she took to make as a phone call to her every day. So we talked almost every day on the phone, probably 6 days a week, at least for a few minutes. So then after, COVID hit, I couldn't find work here. That was difficult. And then my girlfriend dumped me all of a sudden. And that, conspiring with other things, sort of, I ended up moving in with my mother. I knew my mother was not doing well, but it wasn't until after I moved in with her that I realized how badly she was in fact doing. And that my suspicions that she had cognitive decline, dementia, which turned out to probably be Alzheimer's, these suspicions were confirmed. And I found out that she was not handling things and she was not taking medication and she was passing out
Oh,
and she had passed out and broken her arm. And I had heard that was a fall. There were stories that weren't adding up. And I also came to see that there were people around her that were probably looking to take advantage of her. And so it was much more of a mess than I realized. And after a few months of that, I began to have the heavy, heavy realization that she needs me to take care of her, you know, and permanently,
mhm.
and that was something that just for some reason, we had never thought of in the family. And I have a brother who did not want to get involved at all. They hadn't been communicating for years. Um, and so it was kind of up to me. And it was kind of a big smack in the face that all of a sudden here I was in this situation. Um, and so you know, I had to take it on. So that's kind of how it worked. I mean, I can give you a little background on her behavior too, because that's kind of what the book is about. It's not just another, taking care of mom type story or dad or brother or whatever, but she was a seriously difficult person to deal with. And that's a lot of the story. It was not roses and, it was very, very difficult. So, I can kind of get into that if you want.
Yeah, that's a good place to start because I think when I was caring for my mom the last 3 years of her life, which was 2017 to 2020, you didn't share your loved one on social media. You didn't, you could talk about your struggles, but it was rare to see any negative things. You know,
Right.
you know, it was there, but it wasn't common. And it was like, I can't do the Facebook pages, even though I'm sure a lot of my potential listeners would be there, just because it doesn't feel very helpful to me. Like,
Yeah.
people want assistance and they're getting prayer hand emojis, and it's like, okay, well, if that makes you feel better, great, but that just annoys me. So yeah, um, I don't see too many people talking about caring for a loved one, especially a parent that was difficult your whole childhood.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, she was just a tough, I mean, I go into it in the book, but she was just a tough person to get along with. I mean, she was for everybody. And that was just kind of the story of her life, and very difficult to please, if not impossible. Um, and it was a strained, relationship for decades and decades. And she was very, of course, I waited until she passed away to write this book. It's not like I would have done that when she was alive, but I wanted to tell this story because I know people in similar situations, and nobody really talks about it. And it's good to know there's other people out there who have been through this thing, that you're not only taking care of a loved one, but you're doing it through a really troubled relationship, that you hope comes, you reconcile at some point as best you can, which we ended up, I think, doing, which was good, because we probably wouldn't have otherwise. If I hadn't done this, I would have a totally different picture of her to remember. So in the end, it came out for the best for sure. But she was very antisocial, had very few friends, um, held on to grudges forever, loved cutting people out of her life. I can still remember when one of her oldest friends said something to her on the phone that she didn't like. And I mean, they'd been friends for 40 years, never talked to her again, so it was just, that's how it was with her. And unfortunately, she didn't think ahead to how this would affect her later in life. And she had no one, I mean, absolutely no one to help out taking care of her in her old age. Zero. She had no friends, no family members, nothing, except for me. And I was one of the lessons I kind of relearned during this is sort of be careful how you treat people in life, because it can come back to haunt you in ways that you don't expect, and it's weird. She never seemed to get it. It's like it never crossed her mind at any point to say, where is everybody? I mean, it just, why is there no one here, except this one son of mine?
Well, thankfully for her, you did step up, because sounds like you had a lot of reasons to be like, I'm running for the hills.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of the consensus. But and I remember in the beginning, I mean, it was just the chaos of the beginning of all this, which was so hard. That I think there were moments where I said, I can't do this. There is no way I can't do it. I'm sorry, I'm not capable, But in the end, I said, well, if it's not me, it's nobody. So it kind of has to be me. And, I did it, but I didn't think I could in the beginning. And I mean, there were moments in there too, where I asked myself, can I keep doing this? Cause I was totally alone, no help, no family for over 3 years, and as she declined, of course. And it was tough. And I know there's other people, particularly in my generation, I know there's people who have difficult relationships with their parents. I know several of them, if not plenty, So this is going to be more of a thing as time goes on and more people get dementia. There's going to be more people who are going to have to face this question of, if it comes down to me, can I handle this? Can I do it? And I'm sort of living proof that you can, because I did not think I was going to make it. No way. And, but I did.
How long was she on her own after your father died?
She was on her own for about 2 years.
Ooh.
2 years. Yeah.
So
And
you stepped into like bills not paid and
yeah, when he died, she didn't know how to put gas in a car.
oh Lord.
Literally. She went to a gas station and had never put gas in a car in her life. She had to get somebody from the gas station to show her how to put gas in a car. So, I mean, she was just, and she really, really, of course, you can imagine, she obsessed over my father's death. I mean, that's all she would talk about. How, why the doctors killed him. How am I going to go on? I can't do anything. Why isn't he here? Why isn't he here instead of you? I'd rather have him here instead of you.
Ouch.
He's nicer than you are, and a lot of stuff like that, which was hard to take after years, but that eventually faded as her memory faded. It strangely got to the point where she didn't say that anymore. And then she didn't remember even being married. So,
ooh, which is hard, but
yeah. But, go ahead.
well, so she was on her own for 2 years. That sounds like you must have walked into a massive nightmare.
Yeah. And I mean, I go into this in the book too. What also kind of happened at the same time was I had a alcohol problem for quite a while that I kept hidden as best I could. And that kind of came to a head in the beginning of this. I actually got ill while I was staying with her, and I had to stop finally after all these years. So I went through alcohol withdrawal alone,
Ooh.
unmedicated and anything, and gave up, my lifelong drinking habit. At the same time, all this was going on. And so just to add another layer to how bad the beginning, and also in the beginning too, it's that she didn't want me to take care of her. Absolutely didn't want me to, and I tell this story in the book, but one of the, it's weird because her behavior was so nuts. it was very, very difficult in the beginning to tell what was dementia and what was just her being, herself. It was really hard. And there was this, one of the habits she had gotten into was she didn't like people, but she loved animals and rescuing animals and little birds and kittens and stuff. And she lived downtown. So she would constantly, obsessively go feed birds downtown, pigeons. And she got to the point where she'd go to this feed store and buy like 40-pound bags of bird seed and then lug them upstairs and distribute them into these bins. And then she'd go out several times a day and feed birds, kind of like a crazy old lady thing to do. And then the birds would follow her. If you walked with her downtown, there'd be like this little flock of birds who were so used to her that they would follow you around. And
that's an interesting visual.
Yeah, I know. It's like a Hitchcock movie. And then, so anytime a bird fell out of a tree, she'd go snatch it up and bring it home. And then she had this bird sanctuary that she would take them to if they lived, which half the time they didn't. And I was just, all this stuff was so exhausting, and so I can remember going with her to the bird sanctuary and going through this whole thing, in the early days. And then I was around her fridge one day and I caught the smell of something that was off. And I asked her and she said she didn't know what I was talking about. So when she's not looking, I dig around in the fridge and in the crisper, I find this package that's tied up. And after sniffing it and examining it, this is a dead bird. Okay. So then I look in the freezer.
Oh no.
In the freezer, and the freezer is packed full of the same type of packages, like dozens of them. So even for me at that point, I was like, this seems a little more than her. I mean, it's borderline, but it was like, she could have done that when she was 50, but it seemed a little over the top. And I was like, okay, I think that she's more far gone than I realize, And my father, of course, had done a good job. I suspect that she had dementia, early stage dementia, for 5 or 6 years before I showed up. And that he was covering for it pretty well, my father. And then when he passed away, it became more and more obvious as the days went by. And it was very slow in the beginning, I think. It was very slow and kind of hard to see. And we had thought she had a hearing problem.
That's
because,
common.
Yeah. And that's what so we thought it was. And after I was around her more, and living with her, I began to realize it's not hearing. It's that she can't understand what I'm saying. That's why I have to repeat everything 3-4 times. And that became, as time went on, of course, that became more and more obvious,
what happens is they can hear okay. I'm not going to say fine because most of us don't hear so well closer to the end of our life, but their brain is only hearing or processing some of the words. Like you may have asked her, do you want chicken salad for lunch? And she might hear, do you want chicken salad lunch?
Right.
Which, of course, that makes no sense. So it's when you realize that's what's going on in their brain, it makes it a little tiny bit easier to deal with having to speak slower and repeat yourself, which sounds like you learned, but
that was always a battle. It was funny. It's like I never got used to it. And she was so testy that it was, especially in the beginning. I mean, in the beginning, she was just a nightmare to deal with, and very, very, very angry, very hostile, like more than I'd ever seen her. I thought, wow, she's really losing it, And if I raised my voice like this, oh man, she would just scream at me, do not talk to me like that, and I'm like, I'm trying to, so you can hear what I'm, you can understand what I'm saying. And she never got that. That's why, I was talking louder. So it was just, it was it would have been funny if it wasn't so incredibly aggravating, but and then the TV volume gets turned way up and she still can't understand it, how that goes.
My
And
grandfather used to have the TV up at, I don't know, max,
yeah,
but he didn't have dementia. He just couldn't hear for beats. But yeah, it's just like that. Like I can't deal with excessive noise. And the older I get, the worse it gets, which is a little scary.
yeah,
I hope that's not a sign of anything. I think it's because my office is like sound altered. It's not soundproof, but so it's very, very quiet. So when, like was it last night? Yesterday I was sitting on the deck and I could hear all the pretty birds and it was so nice. And then some toddler decided they had to have a complete conniption fit. And I was like, well, I guess it's time to go in, work on that project instead of continuing to read my book. It's, I have a hard time tuning it out. That's what concerns me because I know people with Alzheimer's can't tune out background noise. Although right now there's one of those gas blowers and I could tune that out. So I don't.
Yeah, we had this ongoing thing for a long time that with her hearing, because she would claim she would hear loud sounds and stuff and booming sound. I took her to 6 different ear doctors. And then and she was so impatient, just like, whenever they would try to give her a hearing test, she'd get up in the middle, get up in the middle and go, I'm not putting up with this, and walk off. She would do that with MRIs, with whatever. She'd get up in the middle of them and walk out.
So that was her personality.
Yeah.
Your whole life.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So she only got, I think, ever one actual hearing test done, and it did say like she had a little, it wasn't that dramatic. It was like she had a little lower range, hearing loss, but you didn't say like she's deaf, So it did tell me that I'm not so sure, in the end, after going back, and then we had her ears cleaned and she had vertigo as well. And she had the Epley maneuver done on her several times. And this was a never ending thing. But I think some of it was, as you said, she couldn't differentiate between background noise. And so it just sounded like there was rumbling going on all the time, and yeah, that was a real battle. But eventually later on that kind of faded away and I didn't hear those complaints anymore. But that was a constant thing, her hearing in her ears. And oh my God. Yeah.
And my mom, we finally ended up having to stop taking her out to restaurants because she would say, it's so noisy in here. Okay. Yeah. And restaurants there's some that it's like, for the love of God, I can't even talk to the person across the table from me. So she wasn't wrong. But then like 2 minutes later, she would repeat it. And I just assumed, because I didn't know, that their audio processing isn't very great. Right. I didn't know she couldn't just kind of tune it out, which again, some restaurants, that's nearly impossible. But yeah, that was a real challenge. After my dad died, we had a big memorial for him, and then he was interned in a military cemetery. I'm so glad the 21 Glen salute didn't freak her out. But it was an hour away from home, and of course, the military cemetery, you get like this choice or this choice. None of them were good. So I had to find a restaurant close to the cemetery, that was not any place we'd ever been to, that was reasonably quiet. Unfortunately, that happened, but it's weird. Like, so her hearing was fine, but I always just thought she just didn't realize she was constantly complaining about the volume. And then again, I learned that it was their audio processing. So you managed to navigate all this and stay sober. That's a miracle in itself. So
that was hard.
There was times I don't drink for a lot of reasons, but there were times my mom, I was like, I really wish I could get into that cocktail hour, like, culture, because especially after dealing with my mom, it was just like, I wanted to do something to lessen the stress. So how did you said you had no help? How did you navigate for 3 years with a person that you could have probably easily just packed up and left behind?
Yeah, it was tough. I'll say there's no easy answer. And I mean, I'm sure other people know this too. It can be a bit of a bitter pill when you realize how alone you are. And you know, no helping hands are really extended. Of course, I had lived in LA for 14 years, so I didn't know that many people here anymore. And when I got dumped, most of those friends who I had reconnected with went, with the lady who dumped me, not me. What was I don't really even have hardly any friends here. So I reconnected with a few high school friends, thank God, who I managed to look up. And I mean a handful, like 3 or 4. And that, helped for sure. Because I didn't really have anywhere else to turn. And we're still in contact. But it is weird because there are people, acquaintances and friends will say, "Oh, I'll come over and so you can have a break. I'll come over and watch your mother for a few hours, or I'll come over with some dinner." But people say that, and it never ever happens, ever. And it's, I mean, well intentioned, but it's when you're alone, it's just brutal. And so I did end up looking up some, just out of desperation, looking up some caregiver support groups, which was good. I'm glad that I did that. Unfortunately, this was in 2020 when the pandemic is on. And I really don't like Zoom support group. I mean, I much prefer stuff to be in person when it can be. So almost all of them were either shut down or on Zoom. I did find 2 that were in my area that were still going. And so I started going to those once a month. And, which once a month is not much, when you're alone, but it's, helped. It was great. It was great to be around, because you feel very alone in your little situation. And then you meet these other people and they're in similar situations.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you trade ideas and stories and strategies, and you get their phone numbers and you have somebody to call if you're having a breakdown or. And that did help. I did that, pretty consistently with one of the groups, for, my gosh, I don't know, a year or 2, I think. And that helped. Other than that, I had a dog, which that story was funny too, because when in the early days when I had just moved back here and I wasn't living with her yet, my mother I would see my mother, talk to her on the phone every day, but then I'd see her like once a week or twice a week or something because I lived in a different part of town than she did. And the complaining of, you know, my husband's gone, I'm alone, I'm miserable, blah, 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 about, even though I'm calling her every day, and seeing her as much as I can. So I thought, you know what? I know how her brain works. I can't get her like a little dog because she won't want it. But if I get a dog, she'll want my dog. And then I'll give her the dog, and then she'll have a little dog to keep her company. That was my plan because she had done that before. She'd stolen dogs of mine in the past. So I went to the SPCA and picked out a random little dog. And my plan, for some reason, maybe it was for personality changing. My plan didn't work. She didn't want the dog. So now I have the dog. And so by the time, we're together, I still had the dog. She ended up getting very, very, very attached to the dog. The little dog Sammy would sit with her on her couch all day long, every day. I mean, the whole time he was with her. which really helped. He was by her side the whole time. And so having a dog forces you to go outside and walk the dog, which was a real godsend because, several times a day I'd go, okay, I have to take a breather. I'm taking the dog for a walk. We'll be back in 20 minutes. And then I would be able to go outside and just clear my head a little bit and, and take a few deep breaths and, especially after, tension or whatever, the dog just saved me. I mean, literally, I always credit him. I'm like, the reason I didn't go completely crazy is because of the dog. That's what did it. And so, and, other than that, I'm an artist as well as a writer. So I kind of got back to painting in the time that I could. And I look back and I produced an impressive amount of paintings during that time, considering, I really kind of did. I did it for therapy, and to make another thing that can get to you is when you're doing this 24/7, you don't feel very productive. You can start feeling really down on yourself and very depressed, and you just feel like your life is just, you don't spend time with friends. You don't, you feel like your life is slipping through your fingers, pretty seriously. And so it at least made me feel like I was doing something else. It's like, well, I completed another painting, that's something. And every once in a while, somebody would buy one of the paintings. And, so that helped as well. For sure. I'm glad I had that and that I turned to that.
Well, you know why art's so beneficial for your brain, don't you?
I don't know. You tell me why.
So when you do anything creative, painting, drawing, dancing, anything, it fires up all the regions of your brain, which obviously is good. You get kind of a dopamine hit as well, but it's also meditative. So you're getting like almost yin and yang benefits from art. I was a portrait photographer while I was caring for my mom. And there were times when it was like, I didn't want to deal with these families and their, oh, I'm so old looking, or oh, I'm so fat, all the excuses people use not to do photos. I got to hear all of them all the time. And sometimes it was frustrating. But I would think about like my parents, my dad who's gone, my mom who wasn't living the life that I thought she had earned. And I would just channel all of those feelings into the emotions of creating portraits. And sometimes I'd tell them. The family I photographed 2 days after my dad died, when she picked up her finished work, I told her because she was so happy. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. She was so happy. And I said, well, I have a little secret to tell you. And so, she's like, oh my gosh, you should have rescheduled. I'm like, it's hard enough to get families together as it is. I said it wasn't going to change anything. Rescheduling you. I mean, he was still gone. I was still feeling what I was feeling. I was realizing, holy crap, now I got to deal with my mother. And you were talking about how your dad did everything for her. My dad was a really good buffer. Like I knew what was going on with my mom, but it was once he was removed from the picture, it was just like, oh yeah, guys, she's worse off than I thought.
Yeah.
Sure. So it's amazing how, and I on my YouTube channel I demonstrate like neurographic drawing, which is really good for easing anxiety. So yeah, creativity is really good for your brain.
Yeah, I even did some that were kind of almost a new style where I almost purposefully, it was almost like knitting or something like that, where I would create this really complex repetition of whatever it was, shapes or trees or bushes or whatever, windows on a building. And there would be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And I would just do these little details, kind of like repetition. I would just do them over and over and over. And I don't know why. I guess that came to me while I was, doing this. And for a while there, you can see that style, change. And I did several paintings like that. It was sort of like pointillism, but And it was just because you have only so much canvas. It's not like I have an entire wall with canvas on it. I have a little canvas, this big. So how are you going to make it last? I would just spend weeks on a single painting. And, but it was interesting, but that seemed to help, I guess, in some way.
It's
And
probably
I tried to institute, like, it didn't work all the time. I tried meditation as well. I would do meditation more regularly during that time. And then I would try to do a thing where at like 9 o'clock, because I was usually kind of burned out by that point, I'd say, okay, it's time for my bath. I'm taking my 9 o'clock bath, dinner's over with, everything's done. She's watching TV. So I go in my room and take a bath and try to just shut the door, close everything out, listen to something in the tub. And in my mind, I would try to think, okay, I'm off the clock now, even though I wasn't. But mentally, that's what I'd say. I'd say 9 o'clock from then on, I'm just kind of doing my thing, That didn't really work, but it worked well enough to help me, not go nuts. But with increasing as time passed on, she would start coming, like, even though it was 5 minutes before, I said, I'm taking my bath. As soon as I'm in the tub, knock on the door, and then the door would open and her head would come in the bathroom, and she'd go, are you in here? And I'm like, yeah, I just told you I'm taking a bath. Oh, okay, I'm just checking to see where you are, and that would happen over and over and over again. She would come into the bathroom always, If I disappeared for a minute, she would come in the bathroom. And I felt, you could say, why didn't you lock the door? But it's like, I felt guilty about that. I'm like, no, I don't want, something to happen. And, I don't want her to freak out.
that probably wouldn't have helped.
Yeah, getting interrupted was a thing that was so hard to, and, painting, I would increasingly get it, there was a time later on where I could paint for maybe 15 minutes at a time, and she would interrupt to the point where I couldn't keep painting, So I'd do 15 minutes and then I'd have to deal with her, and then I would do 15 minutes and then I'd have to deal with her. So it was, yeah. And I mean, it's not like I painted all the time or anything. I painted at night, usually when everything had calmed down, and especially in the winter months when it's darker outside. I mean, I don't know what your experiences with sundowning are, but she had something like sundowning where when the sun went down, she would get more claustrophobic and scared, sort of. So it was as if what she couldn't see disappeared, So when the sun went down, it's like the outside just disappeared and there wasn't anything there.
Kind of does.
Yeah. And so she would close her blinds, And so in the winter months, when the sun goes down earlier, those long nights were tough because she would never go out at night, ever, after dark. And if I did, like if I went to the store or something, she'd say, what are you doing? I said, I'm going to the store. You going outside in the dark? And I'm like, yeah, well, I have headlights, And she, you could tell she was like on edge because she didn't think that was a good idea. And it was a weird thing. But that's when a lot of the painting was done, was at night when there's nothing going on. She's falling asleep to the TV,
I wonder if the 15 minutes of painting intermittently through the day were actually more beneficial than you probably understood at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it was a real struggle at the time. But it's funny because I look back at some of those paintings, which I still have hanging here, and you would never know it by looking at them. Like that some of them are the most, placid pastoral scenes of, clouds and flower, and you would never know I painted that 15 minutes at a time, with somebody talking at me the whole time, you wouldn't know. It's weird.
I think it's the meditative effect of creativity. Like,
yeah,
that's just really fascinating. That's gonna noodle around in the back of my brain for a while, just because I find that really fascinating.
Yeah, I can remember during that time I was talking briefly to a therapist or something on a telehealth, call. And she said, "Oh, you do painting. So are they, she was basically asking, are they all like gloomy, angry? And I was like, no, they're just the opposite. They're bright, colorful. Like I'm painting what I wished life was like, not what would be the point of me, I'm depressed enough as it is. I don't need to add to that. So no, they're totally the opposite. They're bright colors and detailed scenes. And so that was funny. She thought that was odd, but yeah.
Well, it is, because a lot of people use art. I did recently a live YouTube live with an art therapist where she was doing journaling, and the art, it was planned for art therapy for caregivers, and she suggested collage. I think I said journaling, because you can process emotions through collage. And I'm like, well, I'm a digital reader, so I don't exactly have magazines and craftland for collage. I don't have, I do paper crafting, so I have inks and paper and tools to cut paper and things to apply ink. That's pretty, so I did the neurographic drawing. So I can see why the therapist was a little like bemused that you were like doing, abstract reds and blacks and yellow and just like pouring your frustrations and everything onto the canvas. That's interesting that you went the other direction.
Yeah, that wouldn't have helped me. Yeah, I was just trying to, I mean, to me, sometimes too, color is like an antidepressant. Like I think it actually kind of is. And, bright flowers and things like that, actually help your mood more than even pastels or intense colors actually help your mood. And so yeah, I was always, using color and kind of fantasy landscapes of cities I would just make up, from my imagination, using a lot of stuff from my imagination, basically. And kind of exercising that and escaping, that's really what I was doing, is I was getting out of the apartment I was trapped in and, going to other worlds in my mind.
Well, that sounds like it was super beneficial.
Yeah.
And you would have loved the support group I facilitate. It is on Zoom, but they are so helpful, and it's it's not quite as stilted as a lot of Zoom meetings are, because they'll just talk. They don't worry about talking over each other, and they're super helpful, and they're amazing. Like half the time I'm like, you guys don't even need me. Like they don't even need me to open the Zoom link. So it's just like, I don't know why I'm here, but here I am. I'll take roll. That's my, they're just amazing. So, but some of them actually attend more than one support group. So that might have been beneficial. A little challenging if you didn't like the online versions, but
Yeah.
an in-person one and an online one might have been beneficial if you'd found the right one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have advice for listeners on how to navigate like what you navigated? I mean, obviously we've talked about the dog and the painting.
Yeah.
And I think those are great examples, being an artist and a dog lover myself.
I mean, I wish that I had, it sometimes is so hard to get perspective, when you have no one to talk to and you're all by yourself, but you got to be careful taking care of yourself for sure. I think there were times where I was not as careful as I should have been. And try to stay grounded in something, try to, constantly, I mean, I was constantly trying to adjust my perspective. Because it can be, very depressing watching someone die, it's not slowly, it's a tough thing to do. And, I lost weight. I stopped eating. Times there were 2 different times where I got down to 1 meal a day. I lost about 25 pounds. And it was just due to stress, And one of those was because we had to move. So I had to find a new place to live, and then we had to move. And I mean, took place over a summer, and it was very tough, and do a better job of escaping than I did. And there, I also, near the end, I should have probably broken down and paid for some help. And because I was very paranoid about money. And I kind of wish I had done that in the latter part. That was kind of a mistake I made, I think, looking back. Near the end, after we moved and her decline became more rapid, we moved, and it was accelerating. And after the move, it just seemed to accelerate even more,
That evil didn't help her, I'm sure.
No, I mean, it couldn't really be avoided, but it was because it was for financial reasons. But it just seemed to really accelerate after that. And she was on hospice by that point because we had, all kinds of medical drama, because she wouldn't show up to doctor's appointments. She would refuse to go. She'd make doctor's appointments herself. She had multiple specialists in the same area. Like, she had multiple cardiologists that didn't even know there was another cardiologist.
Jeez.
And then she got to the point where the cancellations were becoming so bad. I would drive her to the doctor and she wouldn't get out of the car.
Yeah.
Or she'd go into the office and sit in the waiting room for 5 minutes and then get up and say, "Nope, I'm not doing this. Take me home." And
I can understand that part.
Yeah. So it got so bad, and she started refusing so much. And she'd say things like, "I don't want to see doctors anymore. I'm done with them. I don't want to see them any." So what are you going to say? And I don't want to be sitting there with the outside world looking at you saying, "Hey, you're not taking your mother to the doctor's appointments. What's going on?" So the only answer seemed to be hospice. We almost did it once, but refused. And then the second time I went ahead and did it. And so near the end, when I was really beyond burned out, after the move, they offered for a respite stay for 5 days.
Oh, wow.
I had no idea that was even a thing. No one had explained that to me. Nothing.
Yeah, I just learned today, before we were recording this, that respite is part of hospice.
Yeah.
My dad was on hospice. Nobody told me anything.
Yeah.
Now, my mom was on hospice as well, but she broke her leg March 8th, 2020, and passed away March 31st. So there was some, stuff going on between those dates.
Right.
So I'm not surprised. Like, I don't think the hospice companies knew, like, every day was a new challenge. So they weren't offering any more than they absolutely had to. And I don't say that as a criticism, because it was, I think, with hindsight, we kind of forget how just, we go from, oh, there's this virus in China, that sounds bad, to, ooh, it's in Washington State. Oh, crap, it's here. It's just like every day the panic got higher. So, yeah. And I literally, the episode that's coming out after yours, we're going to talk about this.
Yeah. Yeah. So, of course, earlier on, they could have offered that to me, and I would have said, "There's no way." Because if you would have tried to put her anywhere, she would have thrown a fit. There was no way that she would have done that. But she was so far gone by this point. She was doing so badly, and they offered it. And I said, "Yeah, that sounds great. I don't even understand how this works, but sure, go ahead." So, right, in the last months that she was alive, I took her for a 5-day respite stay, and I finally got 5 days to myself, the first time ever in 3 years. And it was great. I mean, but I was kicking myself. So I was like, why didn't I do this before? Why didn't anybody tell me about this? Why did, but whatever, it was what it was. And it could have happened again. In fact, I was trying to get another one, but she passed away before that could happen. But, that was a regret. I wish I had done something like that, earlier, for sure, because I was in pretty bad shape at the end. And I mean, it can't be downplayed, because people don't think of this. And I mean, I didn't think about it, but the, just the grind of it all and the repetition and the illness and watching somebody deteriorate, it can really get to you, you know? I mean, there were times like I was so depressed and isolated that I wasn't sure I was gonna make it, you know? And there, I'd look at her and look at myself and go, yeah, I'm not sure which one of us is gonna last the longest, you know? And I was kind of thinking seriously, you know? But because you can almost kind of feel like, I almost felt like I was deteriorating with her, you know? It was weird. It was like I was losing weight, she was losing weight, she wasn't eating much, I wasn't eating very much, you know? It was just, it's hard to be around somebody who's that ill for so long and not feel like it's affecting you, you know, in some way. So, but anyway, the happy part of the story is that, eventually, after the beginning of our little journey together was so terribly rough, probably the roughest period of my life, with her for sure. In the last, say, 6 months or so, her personality continued to change more and more, and that sped up more and more as she deteriorated. And she eventually just became this totally other person, which was very weird and to watch, you know? And she, I think in some ways, kind of reverted to being like a child, very childlike.
Probably.
And was very sweet and polite and like not demanding. And, she started saying please and thank you, which was completely weird. I'd never heard her say that before. And, I would say, what do you want for dinner? Or I'm making this for dinner. And she'd say, oh, don't bother about me. And I was like, my mother would have never said that in a million years. I mean, your whole life was supposed to be centered around her and bothering about her, And it was just so surreal to see that happen. But that's when, a lot of my old, resentment or whatever we had just kind of faded away. And I truly felt, sorry for her. I pitied her. She was not the kind of bully that she used to be, and she was just this very weak, sick, sweet old lady, who was sitting on the couch and it was just remarkable to see. But I really was able to feel, for her a lot more, have a lot more compassion for her. And if that hadn't happened, if we hadn't gone through this, I certainly would be remembering her differently now. I would be remembering her as the mother I knew 30 years ago, not the lady who was there at the end. And, that for me, that helps because it's like there's two different people. There's that one, the old one, and then there was the one near the end. It was just so easy, And
that probably helped you get across the finish line, because if she been difficult the whole time, I made it.
Yeah, because I mean, in the later months, I was doing everything I could. I mean, she was kind of wasting away. She was closer to death than I realized, and because I didn't know how this works, I'd never been through this before. I really hadn't had a lot of experience with death in my life, to be quite honest, before this. And I mean, I had to be home basically 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it was very, very hard, to do that. But that made it a little easier because, I was like, what am I going to do? I have to watch over her, she's in no shape to handle anything, and, so, yeah, and, that helped. It was sad, but it was touching, and she actually said things that she would never have said or admitted to. She started saying things like, I think there's something wrong with me, which she had never said before. She completely denied having dementia. She denied the diagnosis. Uh, she told the doctor to go to hell when he told her that. And, so as far as there was always nothing wrong with her as far as she was concerned. And near the end, she started to say that. And she told me she loved me a lot more and, asked me to stay with her and not leave her, And I said, of course I'm not going anywhere. Don't worry about it. And then she began to say, I think I'm dying, which is something she never would have admitted. She never really talked about death ever. She would talk about a good diet and how to lose weight and how to, stay young and how to exercise and all that. But I never heard her ruminate on death or dying, ever. And she started to talk that way. And it was very weird. And she said it in a kind of a spooky, way. Like she knew something was up. She would say, I think I'm dying. And I'd say, oh, no, you're fine. Of course, inside I was like, yeah, you're probably right.
Now, there was a time my mom said, there's a couple of times. One, she said, my mind just doesn't work right, or my brain just doesn't work right anymore. And, the snarky part of me wants to be like, you think?
Yeah.
But the intelligent part of me kept that in. But there was also a part that was like, ew, does she know? Is she aware? And then there was one time where she made a comment that she thought her brain was dying. And I was just like, I had no snarky thought at that point. It was just all yikes. I was hoping that it was just like, because that wouldn't have been an unusual phrase for her to say, something kind of that, dark. But I convinced myself that she didn't know it was going on. So, oof. Yeah, the end would be a little tough.
Yeah.
So you took time after she passed to write this book, Forgetting, which I remember the title of again.
Yes.
Was that therapeutic?
Yeah. I guess I had thought about writing it right after she passed away. And I thought, no, because I had a really unexpectedly difficult time with her passing away. I felt, because, for these 3 years and so forth, you think, well, someday she's going to pass away, obviously, and I'll get my life back and I can do all the things that I haven't been able to do. And I'll get right back to it. And, guns blazing, I'll be painting and I'll be traveling and I'll be seeing friends. But it's not the way it worked at all. I was really surprised. When she passed away, which was sort of caused by a fall that she had that I did not expect. She had gotten up and started wandering around in the middle of the night very suddenly, which is something she had never done. And the last couple of days she was around, she started doing that out of nowhere. And the third night she did that, she had a fall.
It's the brain forgetting how to tell your body to walk.
Yeah. And that kind of shocked me, but the fall wasn't that bad, I thought, because I saw it happen. It's not like she hit her head or anything, but she ended up going into a hospice ward of a hospital and she passed away 2 days later. So I felt horrifically guilty, horribly, horribly guilty after she died. I thought that it was my fault. I thought that I could have prevented it. I thought that I should have prevented it. I was just in unendurable guilt for months and months, and I couldn't function. I mean, for months afterward, I would take my dog for a walk and kind of hang around and hang out. I couldn't even paint. I couldn't do anything. And that slowly faded, in kind of 6-month increments. About 6 months later, I was a little better. 6 months after that, I was a little better. And at like a year and a half or so, I thought, well, I'm kind of back to normal, So that's when I decided to write it. I was way too emotional and kind of still angry and, earlier on. And after a year, over a year, I thought, well, I think I've got more perspective on it now, And yeah, certainly I figured I'm going to write a book about this and about her, and our relationship. whether I publish it or not, I'm probably going to write it because I just want to get this down. It was such a crazy experience, and so profound. And, but also, as I was writing it, I was thinking, I wish I had had a book like this to read when I was going through this, because all I was reading was self-help books or, medical books on Alzheimer's by doctors, some of which helps. A lot of the self-help, like when people would have strategies on how to deal with them, and most of those strategies didn't work on my mother. I have to be frank.
Sounds familiar.
She was way too hip and way too used to mind games and stuff for any of the little tricks and, to work on her. They did not work. So, and so that was part of it too. I was like, there's got to be other people out there going through this, probably plenty of them, especially, like I say, of my generation, because I know people who have difficult relationships with their parents. I know people who don't speak to their parents or have a rough time with them or whatever. So this is only going to get bigger, as time goes on. And that was kind of the point. It was just, I wanted to, firstly, it was kind of therapeutic. And then secondly, I wanted to help other people in the same situation to read a book where you go, oh, this is exactly what I'm going through. I can't believe, there's other people who've been through this, and this is how he lived through it, a situation that at first seemed insurmountable. I mean, I thought there was no way there was plenty of times during those 3+ years where I thought, I can't do this anymore. I can't. I'm spent. I can't do it another day, but somehow I just pull it together and, keep on going.
Well, I think this is an excellent book, even for people who don't have a challenging relationship, because it can be real difficult. Sometimes their personality changes in the opposite direction of your mind.
Oh, yes.
So I applaud you for staying sober during all of this, because Lord knows that probably didn't help. And I really appreciate that you wrote the book and came on today to share your journey with my listeners, and hopefully it resonates with a lot of them. And if it doesn't, still check out the book, because you never know. It's always excellent tidbits in everything.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a lot about family relationships, really. It's, it's about half about Alzheimer's, and it's about half about just how people get along or don't get along, and how that spans decades and decades, what happens, and how to try to reconcile if you can,
Well, that's an excellent note to end on, because I think this country needs a lot of reconciliation right now.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming on. And I look forward to, I'm going to read the book, so I will share my recommendations with it when I'm done.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me.
You're welcome.